Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio. Also live on Facebook and YouTube here, having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. And we're glad to welcome back in studio Jake Rouch. He is the Vice President of the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership. Great to see you, Jake.
Thanks, Joel. Good to be here.
I'm excited because you had some big news kind of at the top of the year that you are starting. You've been involved now on a national scale. Can you talk about what this new role for you, at least in this cohort that you're in now?
Yeah, so it's called. It's offered through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's called their Business Fellows Leads program. And what they do is take, you apply, and then they select. In our cohort, there's 35 individuals.
Across the country, huh?
Across the country, and from all different types of chambers. And so there are folks there representing statewide chambers, folks representing large metro chambers, like, say, Atlanta. Oh, wow. And then there's, kind of regional chambers, which we would fall into, and then there's small local ones. And the whole focus of the Business Fellow Leads program is around workforce. And so the content, so basically we got together in, April, I believe was the first meeting. We get together and spent a day down there and kind of got direct briefing. And then every month through September, we do virtual once a month. We get an hour and a half. And then that's followed up by what they call homeroom. So they kind of break the folks who are in the statewide chambers and the big metro chambers.
Yeah.
They have a homeroom. I'm in a group which is probably the biggest of the groups, and that is more of kind of mid-sized cities and places you wouldn't think of as mid-sized, So, and then the real small chambers. And so we take what we heard in those classes and kind of have a roundtable discussion and share. And it's super powerful because you're hearing about both the data and kind of the trends from the U.S. Chamber and what they're seeing, but they really are an incredible repository of best practices on virtually every aspect of workforce. And so they keep each month we kind of get into a different layer. And so we'll have our third kind of in-person, or our third session. The first two sessions, the first was about childcare. And the
Seriously?
second was about K-12 education, yeah.
Okay, I mean, you've been in this chamber space for a long time.
Yeah.
Has the topics of conversation from when you were a wee one in Chamberland to where you are now, have they totally changed?
Well, first of all, I've been a wee one pretty much my whole life, as you all know. I'm not a very big guy.
But you know what I mean? As that young chamber guy, I can't imagine that, chamber people were talking about childcare.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would say they weren't talking about childcare until the pandemic. We knew that. So we held a series of roundtable discussions with different industry sectors during the pandemic. We met with the retail sector, the minority business sector, the manufacturing sector, business services, et cetera, saying, what are your challenges? What are you facing? What do you need assistance with? In the course of that, we had one on workforce. We said, what's the biggest barrier for you to get your people back to work? Thinking it could be transportation, concern over health and loved ones, and the biggest issue that was raised was childcare. And so that began for us a deeper dive into childcare than we'd ever gone to before. So we got a much more informed and aware understanding of childcare. And then Penn State University did a study in Pennsylvania about the state of childcare and pointed out how significant a challenge it was. And the U.S. Chamber did a study and showed what the economic impact of childcare was to each state, and it's billions of dollars depending on the state. I think like, you know, for instance, I think it was a $7.5 billion impact in the state of Texas. Pennsylvania was like 5.4 billion.
Wow.
And they cut it a number of different ways. But yes, childcare is a massive issue, and there is no quick or easy solution to it.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Shapiro put in his budget something like $50 million to incentivize childcare workers. We have this local thing where between the county and ECRA where there's about 2.5, maybe it's up to 5 million now, but they're talking about it might need to be double that in order to fully fund and build the kind of capacity just to handle Erie County.
Yeah, and so I need to clarify everything that I'm going to say, because that's nothing I will say about kind of thoughts on childcare or
Right.
kind of through a structured, formalized process of committees and board review and approval. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the chamber.
Right.
And I can go deeper than anybody in the audience may want you to. However, I think that if you're talking about childcare and how to solve it, we have amazing childcare providers here in Erie. Mm-hmm. So let's just go to the practicalities of it, okay? So you decide you want to open a childcare business, and you find the right facility. You get the facility all set up, and you apply to the state so that you're, let's just say, licensed to handle 100 kids a day. You build your business model around being at full capacity. And I think pre-pandemic, most of our child care providers were at capacity. In other words, there still wasn't enough capacity, right? There were people that still were having challenges. And so pre-pandemic, I think it was a supply issue where it was, we need more supply in the marketplace. Post-pandemic, what you have is a couple of things. You had, number one is that the demand for childcare, people, when they went into the pandemic and their kids were at home, many people just, they all of a sudden stopped and were looking at how much are we paying a month for childcare, and does it make sense for both of us to continue to work and in essence have a large portion of that second salary go to childcare. So some just stepped out of the childcare arena. For those that needed the child care, they had to wait because a child care center might be licensed for 100 bodies, but that's based upon a staffing level.
Correct.
And if the staffing isn't there, then they may have only enough to say we can accept 50 bodies into our program. So they're licensed for 100, but they can't. If they don't have the staff, they can't max out their capacity.
I mean, this is similar to what the hospitals dealt with, where we have the rooms, but we don't have the nurses to cover those rooms, so we're leaving whole wings dormant.
Right. So you have child care entities that the labor shortage on that front, and historically it has not paid well.
No.
And so you can get a lot of turnover, you can get burnout, so to find qualified people. So now I have a business that I built my business model and my pro forma financials around having 100 bodies, or let's just say 90, that I'm going to consistently have 90. But now I'm at 50. Depending on how you built that business, the money that you borrowed perhaps to acquire a facility or renovate a facility, the business isn't working because you're 40 bodies shy of where you need to be to at a minimum break even. At 100, you're making money perhaps. And so the quality of the facility, the quality of the people can be very high, but if the capacity is not there to, meet the rules and guidelines, and we really don't want to go to the state and say, change the rules and make it easier. That's not good for the kids.
Right.
And frankly, it is a pricey venture. I mean, for folks who don't have childcare that are listening, legitimately, this is across the country. You're looking at $1,000 a month. I mean, $1,000, that's $1,000 after tax.
Yeah.
So 12 grand a year, let's just be conservative, say that's $15,000 of income that you have to bring in, 15 to 17,000. You have to bring in that goes immediately out the door to have childcare. So now do the math, right? So what are you making? And does it make sense for you to keep working if you're doing that?
And you know what's kind of the crazy rub of this, though, is on the employer side, especially those that need a lot of workers, but they don't make a lot of money. And I don't want to pick on different sectors, but, we have plants in the West County, plastics plants. I mean, there is no there. They can't go to $20 and $25 an hour because the cost per unit is so cheap, and they're on razor thin margins, generally speaking. And so, but they need the workers. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I need that woman to get re-engaged into the workforce, or that man to be re-engaged in the workforce. Yet I can't pay them, and if they would be spending 70% of their income on childcare if they do come out.
Right. And so we did this session with the U.S. Chamber, and they were talking about it. Then we had a break. So we did one of these virtual sessions, and when we got into our homeroom, I couldn't control myself, and I just said, I don't see how the business model works, right?
And as a child care provider.
I got to know a number of people in the child care arena in Erie. They are first class. The people who are providing child care in Erie, number one, are extremely passionate, but they're deeply professional, and they've been battling this kind of the financial challenges of keeping child care alive and vibrant for a number of years. And now it just got even harder for them. So I definitely feel for them. So, I said that. I go, maybe I'm off base, but does anyone else see that? And to a person, they all agreed, like, this is and the cost for childcare is very consistent across the board around the country to the people we were talking to. We had folks from Iowa that were talking about, a tax credit to employers for doing that. Failed. Employers just didn't bite into the apple. The model that can work, and I've been noodling on this for more than I should. To say I live my job, it's like when I'm cutting grass, I think about this type of stuff.
Sure.
So here's Michigan has probably got the model that we all should be looking at and saying, can this work here, and what's the price tag involved? So Michigan has a program where it's a third of the child care expense is paid by the state, kind of a community college model. Third by the employer, third by the employee.
Wow.
So sounds real logical, et cetera. But you got to get an employer to pay that third. So I've talked to no one about this, so I'm just telling you, you're getting this fresh.
Yeah. And my hundreds of listeners too, right?
Yes. But what I do think has some potential is similar to what we're a similar model to what we've experienced here relative to the CRIZ, right? So the CRIZ sets a baseline, and then over time, if you increase your sales and what you're paying to the state, then some of that money can come back. So let's just say you do the same for individual businesses who want to offer childcare to a portion of the childcare expense to their employees. So you set their baseline, and you determine that your subsidy for your employees is going to cost you $150,000 a year, right? So the first year out of the gate, you pay. The baseline is here's what we paid to the state in taxes. We provided this to in child care subsidies to our employees, and then it's like if your taxes were here and they went up, right? That as long as you paid it, the state paid you the money back. So the state got more money.
Yes.
But the state then remitted it back to you for what you paid to. So in other words, you could say, well, then the state's paying twice, right? But they're really not, because they got more in taxes. So that would incentivize some of the largest, most successful companies to start looking at it. And in essence, you put the money out, then you're getting it back. So you write it off as a business expense, from a
Right.
tax reporting standpoint.
Sure.
You're paying taxes to the state. The state's, you can clearly document it, and the state says, okay, and if not the full amount, then a percentage of it. But you got to do something, because the best employers will say, this is an investment in my workforce. So if you had 50 employees and you were subsidizing them at, say $250 or $300, say $300 a month, right? That's, $15,000 a month, right? That ends up being, $180,000 a year that you're paying out. So $180,000 a year, you divide that into, say, what is it, 2,000 hours,
Right.
right? It is a dollar amount that you're going, but what you're doing is you're going to keep that employee likely as long as they need childcare for a minimum. And then it's up to you to give them a great work experience so that they say, I love working here. They've been a great employer. They've taken care of me, and I'm going to stay. But at a minimum, you're going to hold on to that employee, because where are they going to go and get that $250, $300? Now, if the state were to come in, now you're getting into a number that a lot of working families can say, that's doable for me.
Yeah.
That to me seems, I'm not saying it's easy. It's clearly complex, but I do think that there's a pathway to make it digestible, and in turn, the child care providers getting the dollar amount they need so that they, A, can survive, and B, pay better wages to their employees.
Again, it's about keeping good employees at the child care level. We're talking to Jake Rouch. Again, you think about, okay, this is just one topic that you've been able to bring Erie points of view to a national stage. I think that's pretty cool.
It is cool. And I will say this, that two things really powerful. State of North Carolina, someone at the state level talking about this, their comment was, if you want movement on legislation, keep the providers away from the legislators. Where they need to hear the messages from the employers.
Correct.
Who can't find them. So, it's not that they're dog.
Yes.
They're like, we know you're struggling. We know, and they kind of dismiss it. But when they hear from employers, like, you've got to fix this. So that was one big takeaway. The second was, I think it was in the state of Virginia, one of the chamber guys that has really gotten into this said, let me just tell everyone here, you don't get a little bit into childcare. Once you step into this, it will consume you. And so they have a regional approach, and they have multiple chambers in the area paying for a full-time person to really be in the center of this childcare storm, because it will consume you because of its complexity, the number of players involved, all the issues that have to be kind of looked at and addressed. So it's great to recognize it as an issue. Addressing it becomes extremely challenging.
We'll be back with Jake in just a little bit here. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. talking economic development and especially the workforce and the trials and tribulations that communities have across the country. Jake Rouch from the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership is our guest here. So Jake, I mean, you touched on one issue here, but this is this kind of the whole thing of what you're calling what the business fellow leads. What's the leads part of that?
I'm not quite certain. You know, let me. Part of the reason why, you know, I applied to be in this program is because the repository of information that the U.S. Chamber has is remarkable. And for people who don't realize, so just to clarify some things that people, there's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's the largest private lobbying entity in the United States for business. It covers a wide swath of issues, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, that is a group that, you know, on the labor side of the equation, very pro responsible immigration policy, very pro refugee resettlement policy, because it's about workforce, right? But they handle taxation issues, they handle tariff issues. We did get briefed. We were briefed the day after, what was it, Liberation Day?
Yeah.
By their head lobbyist about that. And he was, you know, truly fascinating, his insights. Anyway, when our class will bring it to, I think, 400 people in the country that have gone through that. And when you go through that, you now have access to that whole network. You have access to all of the research that they do. And so for us, once you kind of zero in, like, hey, we're really thinking about doing something in this, I can get to work going out saying who's doing, you know, research, going in there and quickly finding programs around the country that would make sense for us. So it is it's a great opportunity to kind of dig in on some issues and learn a lot more. I'll just jump in and tell you that the second session was fascinating as well. It's about K-12 education.
Okay.
And one of the subjects that they're really onto there was truth in, I'm trying to think, and I apologize. I was running ragged and I didn't look at my notes.
Well, hold the thought, because we have to take the bottom of the hour news break, and I'm fascinated to hear what they would have to say about K-12, because I feel like even in our community we're at a crossroads for having the outcomes. I feel like we've done really well on bringing the enough capital to bear. Mm-hmm. Now we've got to convert capital into outcomes. Sure. And we'll talk more about that with Jake Rouch from the Chamber coming up. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, also live on Facebook and on YouTube. And we open our phone lines if you have a question for our guests, 814-679-1080. Jake Rouch is with us. He's Vice President of the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership, and kind of focus on Jake's new role on a national scale with the Business Fellow Leads of the United States Chamber of Commerce. And again, a lot of work about workforce. And if there's a 30,000-foot kind of hypothesis when it comes to the United States workforce, what would that be?
Well, it's not even a hypothesis. It's just a fact. And this is something that we identified 15 and 20 years ago, which is it is a pure demographic reality. And the demographic reality is for every worker leaving the workforce, call that worker's unit is 1.0. He or she is being, to fill their job, there's only 0.66 of a worker to fill it. So you have more people leaving the workforce through retirements. The boomer generation is retiring. And demographically, there's just not as many people. That has been a fact staring America in its face. So when people say there's a shortage of workers, it's legit. I mean, there just aren't as many people entering the workforce. So that's the biggest variable at play. That's a black and white one that's not debatable. And so you can get into all of the other issues, right? The skills mismatch, like we're training kids for jobs that don't exist or for the wrong jobs. And then the cultural challenges, which is nobody wants to work, quote unquote, in a dirty manufacturing facility, right? Which none of them are dirty anymore, and they're modern technology marvels. So when you kind of do, so you have a skills mismatch. Where are you training kids? For where are you training kids taking their money if you're at a higher ed or post-secondary institution that charges tuition for a job that is declining, right? So you're allowing them to quote unquote pursue their dream, but frankly, there's not as many job openings as there should be for the number of people going through it. And there's not as many job opportunities. So, those are kind of the big picture issues. And then you just get into kind of you can then delve into more of the political thing, which is when you, and again, I'm not an R, I'm not a D, and I'm not an I. I kind of bounce all around. And so all I would say is anytime America faces an economic challenge and you give prolonged unemployment comp to folks, there is a tendency that they will adjust their lifestyle. So that, so what leads people to not re-enter the workforce can be, it's not the sole reason, but it can be if you adjust your spending and you start getting by on a lot less than maybe what you were making when you were working. The motivation to then go back to work, the job that was good for you before that, now all of a sudden it's like, I've adjusted. I'm doing okay.
Is it almost like COVID was like, and it's a horrible metaphor, but it was almost like an IED that blew up the way that things were with the economy? And my question is, was the economy that good, the way it worked with, a lot of employer power, very, lesser, labor power?
Yeah, I think it accelerated it. It didn't blow it up. All the pandemic did was all the trends that were out there, it just accelerated it faster, right? Things that were going to happen would have happened over 5 to 7 years, and instead they happened over like 2 years.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, have you guys talked about like labor movement and the rise again of private unions? And
how many times in the history of the world does the whole world basically shut down and get a few months at a minimum, right?
Right.
And some money from the government to kind of say, give it some thought. What do you want to do with your life? And a lot of people were not happy before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, they go, I'm not doing that ever again. And they switched careers. They left the workforce. They moved out of an area and decided, I'm going to move back to another location. It caused them to reevaluate all aspects of their life and make decisions. The opportunity for a business, in my mind, is to rethink how you do business and how you treat your employees, what the culture of your business is, and the greatest employee you have, and the one you should focus the most time and attention on, is the employee you have right now, right?
Yes.
And take care. What's the greatest billboard for going to work for your company? It's employees talking about how great it is to work for their company. I mean, right up the street here probably has, they have 4,500 of the greatest cheerleaders in the world. Erie Insurance takes care of their employees. And in turn, those folks, it's not that they don't have any attrition. They have people who leave.
Sure.
But they hold on to a lot of them because they recognize, like, we need these folks to be with us for an extended period for us to maximize the value of the company and maximize the value of those employees.
Talk about the regional discrepancies that you've seen being in this national cohort. Because I guess one of my thoughts that may be or may not be true is that the rich get richer. So the go-go communities, the go-go regions seem to be doing even better. And then there's some people that just will be left high and dry. So we talk about the Nashvilles and the Austins, but even in smaller markets, there's some, and Asheville, North Carolina is a very desirable place to be, irregardless of the floods, right? I mean, how do you fight that when you're not on the right side of that? Of those very popular, people want to be in Austin. I mean, I can't imagine what Austin's traffic is like, but they still get people coming to them.
It's always funny because people, run into me and could be out for a beer, at a party, and they're saying, "So what's new?" And I'm like, "You want me to give you an answer?" You know what I mean? Or they'll ask me a question. And it's like, that you can't answer that in 2 minutes. You're not that interested. But let's just go to this. So the rich do get richer because the volume of jobs in those markets and the volume of overall economic activity in those markets creates churn. Churn meaning in Erie, as an example, you have great talented people that have moved back here, taken jobs, right? And probably are underemployed. But they made a choice, meaning that the demands of the job are not equal to the skills that they have or the education that they have. So they basically took a step backwards intentionally, came here, took a job, and they sit in that job for a while, right? Because they've had a taste of the Big Apple. They've had a taste of Chicago, and they said, you know what? I want to raise my family in Erie. And so usually in places there, the person, there's this pressure to move up the ladder.
Sure.
And as you move up the ladder, that creates an opening that allows somebody to move up into it, allows somebody coming in from out of town to get a position. That's churn, right? Mm-hmm. You got to have job churn. And when you have that job churn, they can adapt to it. And here, when you don't have that, even if somebody is super talented and wants to come back to Erie, there just might not be a position for them to land in. So that's number one. Number two is, I always say you cannot compare. You have to. The best way to compare, and economists would argue with me, but look at a region's gross domestic product, right? What's their total gross domestic product? So let's just use a simple example, and it's a little outdated, but as an example. So say Erie's 270,000 people. The Grand Rapids MSA is probably about 500,000 people. Okay, so they're not. It's not apples to oranges.
We used to think they were a peer, but they've kind of really grown past that.
Right. So Erie's GDP is probably 12 million. The Grand Rapids area is about 37 billion. I'm sorry, billion.
Billions, yeah.
Right. So not even twice our size, 3 times our GDP. And so when you start to look at places that really thrive, you have to look at that GDP number, because the GDP number is really a measurement of total economic activity. And when there's more total economic activity, wages are going to be higher in those communities, right? There's going to be more opportunity beyond the population, but there's going to be more opportunity to open businesses. There's a bigger market. There's more competition. And so that's really what you see, and now my sports analogy that I drive everyone in the office about is, the ball finds energy, right? That's a basketball analogy, which means you have to be moving on the court to get the ball. Like if you're standing still, you're never getting it. And the one thing that we have going on in Erie is I feel as though, and I see this in a number of fronts, beyond the physical building of things, I see more entrepreneurial activity. I see younger generations taking over companies and not sitting on their hands, but they're looking to make investments in that business. They're modernizing it. They're looking at making acquisitions. There's, the energy of the overall Erie region is increasing, right? But it has to stay there. Like you have to sustain that energy. If you sustain the energy, the ball will find us. And so events yesterday where we didn't just have the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and Congressman Kelly and Senator Fetterman in town. We also had two folks from NAIOP, which is you stand for the National Association for Industrial and Office Properties. They were involved in our discussion. There were two representatives from the rocket companies based in Detroit.
Yeah.
The owner of that company is Dan Gilbert. He owns the Cavs. That's the second time they've been to Erie because they've seen what we've done here, and they see us as a kindred spirit, as a place that's reinvesting in itself. And we want those people to see and know what we're doing because so any kind of media stories where a third party comes in and experiences us and objectively says there's something happening here. Christian Simbita, who bought the Renaissance Center, if that's an outside investor coming here and making a decision to invest here because what he sees is different than what others. Like he sees it and says, you don't get a chance to go into a market necessarily before it's popped, and he feels this market can pop. Now, it hasn't, yet. We're becoming, we're modernizing in a lot of ways,
right.
But the jobs have to follow. But you could say, well, we got to get the jobs and then we can do that. No, it's one or the other. And in our case, I do think that there's a growing appetite that we have to start going out and confidently and aggressively putting our name out, talking a little bit of smack about Erie, Pennsylvania, so that people start saying, and hearing about us more. Because they collide with us in media, and if they collide with us with people posting that are alums or, grew up here, the more you do that energy that gets out there, the ball will start coming here more often.
I don't want to get political, but we did 10 candidate profiles before the primary. And more than once, the conversation centered around population loss as a critical issue, especially for the city. But it's not just, city people leaving and going to the county. The county has experienced population loss. We have, like you say, nationally, we have a net decrease in workforce. Certainly in Erie County, we have a net decrease in workforce. How do you deal with the population thing? Because aren't jobs rushing to where the population
Absolutely, yeah. They're going to go where there's a workforce. I mean, that's where people make investments because they may love your place, but if they don't feel they can find the bodies, they won't come here.
But we're trying to build a sense of place. We're trying to build the coffee shops and the gyms and the climbing things. But
population loss is it's a very challenging thing. Okay?
Have you guys talked about this at all? Has it come up?
Yeah. I mean,
as far as on the national level,
national level right now, the biggest threat to our population going further down is the decisions at the federal level that have basically unplugged the refugee resettlement program. We have arguably the best refugee resettlement program in the country. We have, multiple agencies that are first-rate Catholic charities, MCRC and USCRI. They're bringing in, 1,000 to 1,500 people a year. we have, as a community, should pat ourselves on the back because this is not immigration. These are vetted refugees that have stayed in camps many times for 6 months, a year, 2 years, being vetted. And then they come to Erie, and Erie employers here hire them. They integrate. They've gotten to the point now we have generations of Ukrainians and Serbians and Bhutanese, and they're building businesses, and they're an asset. So that faucet's been on for a long time. And now if you turn that faucet off on top of, the population loss that's happening naturally, you could really see a problem that the community's facing. And, there's the city of Erie population and its loss, which is a concern. And honestly, and I'm not calling anyone out, I would just say the city of Erie school district's performance is the variable there, right? You have to. The school has done so much, but I mean, they have done incredible work, the hard stuff on the finances, right? Now the performance, and the physical plants are being addressed. The school closings have been addressed. Those are really hard things to deal with, and not popular. And now it's about getting the academic performance of that school district ratcheting up at a faster rate. It's moving in a better direction, but it's got to go faster. When the City of Erie School District performs well and really gets up to its peer districts here, I think you're going to see people move back into the city. But if you have kids, you make a decision about their education, right? That's not. I know you can get a first-rate education in the Erie School District. That isn't the case, right? Mm-hmm. But people read scores and they look at numbers and they make a decision. It's their kids. So that's it. As far as the county's population going down, I do worry about that. Mm-hmm. From an economic development standpoint, practically speaking, you're saying, what are the raw materials I need? I need land, I need buildings, I need bodies. And when the bodies start to shrink, it makes it harder to retain employers that we have here, and it makes it definitely more challenging to attract an employer to come here.
Jake Rao is with us. What do you think some of the other subjects you're going to be talking about here on this national level? Because I hope you'll come back, because I feel like it's a unique you have a unique seat at the national conversation for basically the critical issue of our time, which is keeping our people engaged in the workforce.
Yeah, and so there's and so what other ones? Career and technical education definitely will be one. Higher education will be one. There will be likely something on skill upgrading of existing employees. There'll be something about just retention strategies for keeping your workforce. Yeah. And there'll probably be something on, successful workforce recruitment strategies, as well as, for both regions and for employers. I'm really interested in, real applicable solutions to our region, right? Not everything that you hear around the country will work here. So you have to factor in all the variables and ingredients that are in this market and look at what they're doing and saying, could that work here or couldn't it? Because something could sound great somewhere else. You dig into it, talking with somebody on the side about it, and you realize they had something there that, we can't replicate here. Something unique, some variable that's different.
Again, you probably appeared on 100 TV shots talking about capital being the primary need around Erie. Has workplace replaced capital as the number one need in Erie, PA?
I actually
workforce. I mean,
I think that capital. I've said capital is over the last 10 years, without question, from a capital standpoint. I don't see that. I haven't seen that as a problem. There's more and more and more tools and availability of capital and creative tools, as well as business-friendly tools. So capital has not been an issue. It's been workforce. I mean, it just is. And I firmly believe that we actually have all of the institutions necessary to produce workforce, right? Mm-hmm. Both through the K-12 system, the higher ed system, as well as the adult ed system. So the institutions are there. I think that the secret sauce is going to be, how do we connect to the talent pools out there and position, we have to get the right training. So creating the curriculum is one thing. Then you got to get the right trainer. That isn't as easy as people think. And then you have to reposition folks to look at particular careers and opportunities in a different lens. So in other words, if I say to you, hey, you're going to make, like, this is what I always think, that we always market something as a X number of dollar hour a job, right?
Yeah.
So if you're making 18 bucks an hour a job, some people say, well, that's a pretty good job, right? And I always say, really, that's a $40,000 a year job. Now, if I offered you a $40,000 a year job, somebody would be like, well, I got a chance to make 40 grand a year, right? And someone else thinks like, oh God, he's making 40, you know what I mean? And I'm only making, 18 a year, 18 an hour. He's doing a lot better. No, he's not. He's not doing better than you.
No, he's not.
And so a little bit of it is positioning, but it's also just, I think we've got to show people that, like manufacturing, which I'm a huge fan of, there's a career there. And I can say that with confidence. There's going to be demand for those jobs. There is going to be a career. So it isn't like those. We're coloring the landscape by things that may have been true in the 70s and 80s, and into the 90s.
And we need to look forward.
And the forward look is so positive, and that's across the board in a number of different arenas.
I'm going to leave it there. Jake Rouch, Vice President, Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership. Thank you so much for taking the time. Come back, because I love these conversations, and this is one of the key things for our community. Appreciate it.
You bet.